Dear Dr. Lisle, do you have any tips for getting yourself to do the hard things you know you should do? I am a voracious consumer of self-improvement content. I truly believe in the science and superiority of the whole food plant-based diet, in the importance of regular exercise for physical and mental health, and in the benefit of productivity and life improvement. I have things that I know would absolutely improve my life in the long term, but I cannot seem to make myself do these things even though I am high in conscientiousness. It's as if I keep convincing myself I can just slip on by being lazy. It's a pattern that has followed me all my life. I'm quite smart, always got good grades, but I've only put in the effort to do well rather than extraordinary well, like I could have. Even though I know this would be of great benefit to my life in the long run, I just don't know what to do with myself anymore. I'm in my mid-20s and obese, lonely, depressed, addicted to technology, and performing far below what I could be in life. How do I get myself to do the things that I know will make myself more happy and increase my competitiveness in society?
Well, what's happening is what we're going to do is we're going to understand this is just one of a billion permutations on the question of why does anybody do anything, or why does any animal do anything that it does. So the reason why any creature does anything that it does is that it's running a cost-benefit analysis. So if it's a worm, it's running a very simple cost-benefit analysis about the temperature of the soil or something that it smells. In other words, it's a pretty simple machine. A human is the most complex computational machine that has ever arrived at by evolution on this planet. That means that the cost-benefit analysis that the human is going through in its decision-making is extraordinarily complex, and it has all kinds of variables that you can't see. So you have access to some of those variables consciously, but the vast majority of the variables and most of the explanatory power is probably percolating below the surface of your awareness as certain instincts get activated as you become aware of the environmental contingencies that are around you. So the reason why you do things the way you do them, and the reason why you see repetitive patterns in people's behavior, is because their behavior is in an equilibrium. There's an equilibrium in the cost-benefit analysis. It's essentially like if you're trying to analyze a business and look at the rate of return on the business, and you're not really that interested in anything as long as the rate of return is between 7 and 8%. And it's a complicated business, and there's receipts coming in from all over the place, and all kinds of different offices and salaries, and et cetera, et cetera. But, for 19 years out of the last 19 years, it's been somewhere between 7 and 8% rate of return. That's just what it is. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a little lower. Okay. In the Great Recession, it actually went negative for 2 quarters. Big deal. Nobody cares. Everybody understood it. So that just because one little thing changes in the spreadsheet a little bit doesn't mean it's going to change the overall CB. So just because one office went up 3% in its receipts last quarter, management is not all excited about it, and they're not saying, well, what on earth did they do in that office this quarter that made that happen? They just look at it and they say, well, it's no big deal. They don't even notice. Okay, you guys had a decent quarter. Who cares? Nobody cares. Nobody's interested in why. They just consider it random, unknowable fluctuations. Now, so this person's behavior is in a long-term a set of equilibria. And the reason why that's true is it's due to a bunch of complex cost-benefit analyses. The only thing that changes the person's behavior, the person is tearing their hair out, frustrated about, why can't I change my behavior? Why can't I change my behavior? I see all these positive reasons for it. Well, it doesn't matter. The positive reasons aren't sufficient to change the behavior because it's not influencing the underlying cost-benefit analysis. The underlying cost-benefit analysis says it's not worth it. Oh, if you eat really healthy for the next 60 years and you're in your 20s, then you might not have a heart attack when you're 83. Who cares? I'm 25. Like, it's going to make any difference? Okay, so the human being is running the cost-benefit analysis, and they're not seeing the upside. And so they say they're obese and they want to be more competitive. Yeah, a lot of people want to be more competitive. I always wanted to be richer and better looking. And there's things that I could have done from the time I was 12 years old that would have had both of those things happen. So I always could have done something to make myself a little bit better looking. And I could always done something to make myself richer. Sometimes making yourself better looking makes you poorer. Then you got a trade-off. Okay? But the thing is that the only thing that's going to change the situation is going to be new information. New information is what changes the CB. So suddenly, we find out, this is just ridiculous. Jen's going to roll her eyes if she ever listens to this. All right, so we find out that there's some extraterrestrials that are running around planet Earth now that have landed, and they're not actually poisonous, and they're not trying to take over our government or anything, but they need to eat some people, okay? Well, now does that change your CB? Well, I think it does.
Dr. Lisle, are you talking about aliens again?
Yes. Okay. So the truth of the matter is that its information will change the CB. Now, enough information that is relevant to the problem will change the CB enough to actually change the behavior pattern. It's not going to change it if the sales go up in that quarter for that office to 3%, maybe 3.5% the next quarter. Nobody cares. But if they went up 30% in the next quarter, now you've got everybody's attention. Now the whole company changes policy because some hotshot manager went in there and made a change, and it made a big difference in sales. Okay, now you've got our attention. So, the motivational speaker guru of my childhood was Mr. E. James Rohn of Adventures in Achievement. And Rohn used to say, well, how do you set your goals? How big do your goals have to be, et cetera? And he said, they have to be big enough to turn you on. And that's right. In other words, the goal needs to be big enough. You have to imagine an outcome that is sufficiently exciting that your nervous system says, hey, that's worth having. Now, what Rohn didn't know was he didn't know that you can't just put it through your imagination. Your cost-benefit analysis actually runs a perceived probability of success on whether or not you think that is likely for you. They sort of skip over that in all that self-help literature that this person's reading because they don't understand that. And so the idea is just dream big, visualize big, fancy thoughts, visualize your success, and that's how you're going to manifest positive things, which is a complete and total bullshit. But what we want to do, though, is we want to look at a situation and we want to see, okay, well, what would it take? What do you believe that it would take that would make a substantial difference in your life if you change your circumstances X degree? Now, that's important to try to get that clear. So if the person's obese, maybe they're 50 pounds overweight and therefore not in a very competitive situation with respect to mating, for example, and they realize, well, I'm really not particularly motivated to lose 5 pounds, okay? And I'm not particularly motivated to lose 10 pounds. And if I think about it, I'm really not that motivated to lose 15 pounds. Now, if I could lose 50, I'd be motivated. But here's what gets interesting. I don't have the perceived probability of success that I could do it, okay? So they sort of know that in theory it would be possible, but their own perceived probability of success that they could do this is not high. Okay? So, and a lot of times what happens is that even though it's logical that you could see in theory how it is that you could do something, until you experience that you have done the things that are required to do it, you are not sure, your perceived probability of success is low. So a low perceived probability of success with respect to a component of a goal is a very, very important issue. So when a person scans over their life and looks for things that they would logically hope to change significantly, and they can imagine a different set of circumstances where their life is a lot better, they are also running through their head their understanding of a matrix of sub-goals that would have to take place in order to have this happen, and they're overwhelmed by it and aren't sure that they can do it, and they don't know enough about the details, and so the whole thing actually looks implausible. This is where expert help, expert analysis, the right perspective on what it takes to achieve things, etc., is required. And that's what part of what we try to do here is try to give some of this information out in a way that people can use it without having to talk to us one-on-one or anybody else one-on-one. It can still be super useful to talk to people one-on-one to break down a goal into sub-goals. Sub-goals are the things that are required to do any goal. You don't write a book, you write a sentence, and then you write another sentence, and then you write another sentence after that. Okay? You don't learn to play tennis. You learn one tiny little fundamental after the next. That's how you do it. You don't, quote, learn to play the piano. You learn what middle C is, and then we start from there. And you don't lose 50 pounds. You lose 2 or 3 ounces a day by doing a really good job on a plant. That's what you do. And folks, that's all you ever do. There is never a day when you lose a pound. There is never a week where you lose 17 pounds. That is not how it works. It's 2 or 3 ounces a day. And the way you lose that 2 or 3 ounces a day comfortably and reasonably and well is not to starve yourself. It's to make the correct dietary choices, and then it automatically takes place. Okay? So there is no secret sauce. It's simply the repetition of excellence in fundamentals. That's what will get us there, and nothing else will. Nothing else that's not crazy in that regard. You can get addicted to some kind of legalized speed. That could help. They keep doing that. All right, so here's the deal. So the deal is that what we need to do is we need to look at some things that we're going to change because we're going to try to get new information. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run experiments. The experiments allow for a short period of time to change how you're doing things rather than have some kind of a vision in your head that you're going to have to make some permanent wholesale changes in order to get to your goal. And when your mind scans through and runs the cost-benefit analysis on that, it just shrugs its shoulders and says, forget it, I don't think I'm going to do it, I don't think I can do it, I don't think I will do it, so why even bother to do step one? Okay? And if we don't do step one, then we never get new information. So that's the value, the tremendous value of running experiments. Now, another thing to do is to do structural changes. So if you live in a house with a bunch of roommates that eat a bunch of crap, and there's never room in the refrigerator for your stuff to get it organized, then buy a refrigerator and stick it right in the kitchen, okay, or put it somewhere else. In other words, you change your environment structurally. Structural changes in the environment are major because what they do is they change the cost-benefit analysis of all kinds of behavior. They shift behavior patterns by virtue of the fact that we've changed the cost-benefit analytics. So this is the reason no government program of education ever did anything with respect to reducing smoking. You can forget about that. What changed it was making it illegal to smoke inside of buildings. That's what did it. Okay. Then people had to go outside in the cold in Minnesota in February to light up every hour. Finally, they just said, forget it. We're not doing it. So structural changes, changing the cost-benefit analysis of the whole spreadsheet that underlies the behavior pattern, that's how we do it. Now, in this case, there's some things that I would tell this person to do. I'd say, okay, guess what? Shut down your technology for 14 days. That's how you're going to do it. You can check your email from the library, or you can check your email. You could just say, okay, I'm going to check it every other day. People can just wait. And I'm going to do it at 6 p.m., and I'm going to check all my email from 6 p.m. to 6:20 p.m. I'm going to answer what I can answer, and then I'm done. Okay? Figure out how it is that you are going to pull yourself away from Facebook, Instagram, InstaFace, MyFace, whatever the heck it is, and get out of it. Okay? Don't be watching a bunch of stuff on YouTube, etc. This is the last thing you needed to hear. All right. Then, white knuckle some self-discipline. That put in half an hour a day of exercise. Do it every day. No excuses at all. Now, what are we trying to do here? What we're trying to do is we're trying to discover something important. And it's the most important thing when it comes to sustaining any long-term behavior change in the face of the pleasure trap or the ego trap. And that is that what we need to do is we need to discover and cherish the fact that our behavior is the engineering device, and it is the only one that will cause a shift in our self-esteem. So right now, there are going to be 3 or really 4 different processes. 3 of them are esteem processes that are the essentially the foundation of happiness in the way the human nervous system works. The first is self-esteem. And self-esteem is a moral judgment that your internal audience passes on you about when it observes your effort with respect to any worthwhile goal. So if you do a half-assed effort, it gives you half-assed feedback and says you did a half-assed job. If you are downright self-destructive and self-indulgent, it looks at you and it says, shrugs your shoulders and says, well, that was shitty. You're really mediocre. Okay? People believe that that's the internal critic and that's what beats us up and that's what causes our self-destructive behavior. None of that's true. Those feelings are the result of the fact that we got sucked into the pleasure trap. Now, getting sucked into the pleasure trap, shouldn't be any embarrassment. It is massively underestimated. So everybody's chasing around the block looking for the reasons why people are self-destructive with respect to pleasure trap processes, and they're looking to their childhood, and they're looking to bad experiences, and they're looking to the warm feelings that they had with, chocolate chip cookies at their grandmother's when they grew up, and their house at home was all disrupted and bad and contentious, and so that's the only place they ever got any comfort, and that's what they're seeking now. That is all BS. None of it's true. The reason why people are sucked into the pleasure trap is because it's the pleasure trap. It's the hyperactivation of pleasure pathways artificially by modern stimuli, whether it's gambling, pornography, recreational drugs, alcohol, sugar, fat, salt, etc. That's what it is. Now, so don't expect that it's going to be easy, and don't expect anybody to hold your hand. Like, you just got to tough it out. You got to be willing to run the experiment to pull yourself out of the pleasure trap. So do it. And what you're going to find, you're certainly capable of doing it. It's just motor control at the end of your finger. So you understand that if you do this and you pay the price for a short period of time, you understand that you're not that motivated to pay the price because you understand that you'd have to pay it sort of indefinitely and religiously to lose that 50 pounds. That would be the thing that would actually change your competitive standing and change your life. But what I want to argue is that a big price that you're paying that you are generally unconscious of is the internal audience's daily frown. The internal audience is not going to give you any positive esteem, because you don't deserve it. And yet, if you start to earn it, it will give it to you very quickly. It may give it to you in a modest degree at the end of one day. It might even do it at the end of 2 hours. I've watched my own internal audience when I've been feeling sort of, self-pitying about something for a while, some deal one way or the other, some girl dumped me, you know what I mean? I don't know what it would be. But the point is, I could feel a little bit self-pitying, like, gee, the village owes me a little bit better. I've been in that state before. We all have. I don't know, maybe Alan hasn't been, but most normal people have been there. And then I notice that if I'll get up and get moving and start taking action and start straightening things up, getting things organized, i.e., picking up after the hurricane, that pretty soon what happens is that your internal audience, we're no longer in a whine mode looking to the village for, looking to the referees for help. Instead, our internal audience starts to give us a thumbs up that it appreciates the efforts that we're making. And when you notice that shift, and you can notice that shift dramatically in 7 days with respect to dietary pleasure trap type behavior, that you can start, it isn't that your self-esteem will soar, but it feels very different. And now you realize, that's interesting. That is not an accident. That is not ephemeral. That is something that is reliable and consistent. Esteem is by nature perishable. You only earn it and then you can lose it and earn it and lose it, etc. You aren't seen by the world as a great person for doing one good deed and then do a bunch of mediocre stuff. But your self-esteem is something that you can earn it every day. And so for this individual and any other individual, this is a great question that we start off with today, because we may not get to question 2. The thing is that this is a prototypical problem for people. So therefore, this speaks to a huge percentage of people that are struggling with anything. The answer to the question is, how am I going to get myself to start making the most of myself? Answer, challenge yourself to a short-term experiment, and when you do that experiment, pay attention to the most important outcome variable that you are not designed to pay attention to, which is the self-esteem mechanism. Pay attention very closely. You will find the feelings of self-loathing and self-disgust and mediocrity will be gone. Okay? That's interesting. It is not a roaring change of your happiness, but it is a very, very significant one. Now, the next thing that happens is, the next feeling process that's important is the process of self-confidence. When you work diligently at something, you will eventually see progress. And when you see that progress, your nervous system is going to run an analytic on whether or not the amount of progress was worth the effort that we put in. Very often the answer is no. Okay? But that's in context of us not paying attention to the vital importance of self-esteem. So that's why we want to look at this, and we're going to work diligently at something until we start to see some improvement. When we see improvement, we can start to actually run an appropriate analysis on what this thing is going to look like. Now, this is why I'm so determined so often to try to run math and try to explain things in a way in weight loss that people can understand. Because people have highly distorted views of how it is that this is supposed to go. They think that they make a snap decision, suddenly they become, a McDougall a maximum weight loss mogul, and that this is the magic thing is supposed to hit their, like Tinkerbell used to, touch your skull, and now everything changes. And now you're going to sort of roar out of the gates here, and we're going to lose 10 or 12 pounds a month, and you're going to have this dramatic change, in the next few months. This is the magic that waits for you. This is Rocky Balboa turning your life around in 6 weeks. Forget it. Okay? Exceedingly unlikely, not true, almost has never happened. I mean, it has happened in a few cases, but typically that's not a typical response of human biology to these kinds of changes. Yeah. More like a pound a week, okay? So it's going to be more like you do a really good job and it's going to take a year. And so we're not going to race there. We're not going to get spectacularly positive feedback at the scale every week. We're not going to drop 3 or 4 pounds and another 3 or 4 pounds and we're down 15 pounds in a month. It happens. Don't count on it. And if you did, it's mostly water. So month 2, it's not going to look anything like month 1. You have to understand that these changes are inexorable and they will happen in the right way and they will work, but you have to do it. You have to make the right choices and you have to make them consistently. So I want you to know that when you start looking for feedback, we have to run the experiment long enough. If you're 50 pounds overweight, you're obese, and you do this well for 2 weeks, at the end of 2 weeks, we should definitely see you down somewhere between 2 and 4 pounds. When you can do that by taking averages. Take the average 3 days in a row right now. Take the average 3 days in a row 2 weeks from now. Those averages, we should see you down 2 or 3 pounds. When we do, I want the response to be, "I'll be damned, this thing is working." Not, "Oh my God, I did all this work and we're only down 2 or 3 pounds." No, we didn't do all this work. What we did is we're going to do what is required to get this job actually done properly, over and over and over and over again for the rest of your life. Okay? And notice what happened to your internal audience in the last 2 weeks. Notice the end of the self-loathing. Notice a feeling that you can only get through this type of process. It's called pride. Okay? That pride that comes from that work, that will not leave you. You will not habituate to it. Okay? If you do it again the next day, you'll get it again. You do it the next day, you get it again. Then you screw up the next day, fine. You just learned a lesson. You didn't get pride that day. You didn't deserve it. Okay? Now, the thing is if you continue long enough, this person says they've got high conscientiousness. Really? Are we willing to enjoy the process of earning and feeling self-esteem for a month? Because if you are willing to do what it takes to enjoy that outcome, then at the end of a month, you will have a very significant and notable change in your body. You will see it. You can see it on the scale. It's not going to be 2-3 pounds. It's going to be 6 or 8 pounds. It's like, oh, there's no question that this works. Okay? And now what happens is your ability to run a proper cost-benefit analysis on this entire process now just got better. You are now not operating under a distortion that people will tell you it's supposed to be quick and easy, but at the same time you realize a little bit of effort, you're not sure you're willing to do it. The whole thing feels impossible because it feels like you're going underwater and try to hold your breath for 6 months or 9 months and then finally get to the other side and be beautiful. That's not what we're doing. We're not going underwater and holding our breath. We are making a change, and we are experimenting with whether or not our life and our openness and our self-indulgence and our conscientiousness can intersect in a way that we can actually pull this off and settle in to a new way of doing life. Okay? And if we can, we're going to experiment with it because it's not a natural thing. A golf swing is not natural. A baseball swing is closer to natural. Tricky to do things that are a little bit unnatural. Okay? So by doing things that are a little bit unnatural, but you can eventually, they feel better. You get in a groove. That's how it is that we're going to do things. If you do that, you're 30 days away from knowledge about how your self-esteem works. You're not going to forget it. You're going to be watching for it, and you're going to see it, and you're going to see the times when you screw up, and you're going to observe that it is literally a reflection of the excellence and diligence of your behavior, and it's not a reflection of anything else. There's no internal critic to talk back to from your cognitive therapist. No. That internal critic, the internal audience, is giving you honest-to-God feedback about what it is that you did, and it's very clear what the printout is, and guess what? If you don't like the printout today, change it tomorrow. Because it's an honest critic and it's an honest audience, and it will change if you do. Now, so what are we going to do? Get out of the technology. Get yourself half an hour a day of exercise. Cook up yourself a big pot of vegetable soup that you're going to eat a whole bunch of helpings out of it this week. Are you going to be perfect? Probably not, but you could. The aim at a serious goal. We can look out over the horizon and we realize, okay, big enough to turn us on. It's what, January? Guess what? By September, you could be in screaming shape. A whole new life, completely different competitive standing. Not even close. Do we want to try to get there just to see what it's like? Well, of course, if it was easy. But what if instead what we had to suffer through was 9 months of very high self-esteem? That's not so bad, is it? Okay? And along the way, a growing sense of confidence that would start to speak very loudly within a month, when we would have enough reliable feedback, that we would have enough accuracy in our ability to estimate the parameters, that we would say, oh my God, I can do this. If I can do the first 7 pounds, I can do the next 43. There's nothing in principle different about the next 43 that's different than the first 7. So why wouldn't I try another month and see what it feels like to go down 14? Okay? So, what will cause a behavior change? New information. How are we going to get new information? We're going to change our environment to a new set of circumstances, i.e. a new set of information, which is the configuration of cost-benefit analysis with respect to particularly energy output, by doing any structural changes in the environment that we can. Buying an Instapot, learning how to work it. Getting a refrigerator in there that works, that isn't filled with other people's crap. I'm not sure what structural changes. Do you need a decent pair of knives? How about some decent Tupperware containers? Do we need to throw all the crap out of the pantry that's in there and grit our teeth as we send $287 worth of food into the garbage? Maybe so. Okay? But what we want to do is we want to make whatever structural changes are obvious and we think might be useful. And then on top of that, the last change we make is to realize, you know what? A new set of information would be, why not run an experiment? Why not? Okay? Jim Rohn used to ask a set of questions at the end of his seminar. I forgot about it. I hadn't remembered this. This is now 30 years out of the sky. It's probably the last time I thought about this. It was a beautiful, inspiring sequence at the end of his lecture. He said, people might say, why? Why do it? What's the point? Blah, blah. Why do all these big things? And he said, my answer to that is, why not? Why not? What else are we going to do? Are we just going to replay the way we've already been doing it? Settle for the internal sense of mediocrity and that we have not actually actualized our potential? Is that what it is that we're going to do? Why not? Why wouldn't we try? Why wouldn't we do something different? Why wouldn't we take a chance on something that looks like it's logical, reasonable, and yet it's aiming at something really outstanding? Why not? The next question he said, why not you? Other people can do it. Why do they have any special dispensation? Why not you? There's no reason why not you. You can. You can do this. Nobody is stopping you. The world's powerless to stop you from doing this. This is a fate that is in your own hands. Why not? And finally, the last question he says, why not now? Why wait? Okay? Now is an excellent time to take this on. So, why not? Why not you? Why not now? Run the experiments. Watch your self-esteem change. Do the first fundamentals that are associated with the long-term goal, and watch your self-confidence grow. At some point down the road, when you have done an excellent job and you have got results, you will get the beginnings of the gold that comes with these changes, which is esteem. Esteem is what it is that we're seeking. Esteem is what it is that we are consciously directing the goal towards. We want other people to love us, to be attracted to us, to want to be in relationships with us of various kinds. That's where the rubber hits the road in evolution, is in esteem. But folks, we can't skip over the steps that are required to get to the esteem. That's what the world wants to sell you. The world wants to sell you that you get to shortcut your way to esteem. Imagine your greatness. Come to my seminar. Awaken the giant within. Okay? Find your own greatness. I remember embarrassingly on the back of Nathaniel Brandon's book, I think called Breaking Free, was the whole notion of repressed pain and childhood trauma that was stopping you from being great. It's nonsense. He had bought into the Freudian nonsense. As fine a thinker as he was in many ways, he made classic mistakes of that genre. Buy this book, find out the buried greatness that's within you, i.e. it's just some little trick and some little insight that's going to change it for you. No, that isn't how it works. The way it works is with hard work, diligence, fundamentals, feedback that comes from within, from the self-esteem mechanism, and then finally, as you work diligently, what happens is your self-confidence starts to rise. When your self-confidence rises, that is as a result of observing the effects of your efforts and seeing that your performance has changed even when nobody else can see it. That changes your cost-benefit analysis on whether or not it's worth continuing. That is super important. You will not continue to persist in efforts unless you get feedback from some feedback process. You're not designed as an animal to continue to put out effort unless you've got evidence. Don't look for that evidence in esteem cues from other people. Look at it in a measurable process where you can see objectively that you're improving. Because if you're not, then there's something about your fundamentals that is failing you, and you need expert guidance to find out what it is. That's what Chef AJ needed. Chef AJ was a very diligent eater. She was very knowledgeable about food. She was extremely competent in the kitchen. She did not understand some very important fundamentals about calorie density and weight. That was the easiest fix, folks, that I ever had to give somebody that turned their life around literally on a dime. That was one conversation that was shorter than the one that we're having tonight. Okay, I remember walking around my cul-de-sac that day. I was out. I remember wondering if the neighbors were interested in hearing what I had to say. Okay?
You may have changed more than one life.
Right. Point is that I had lousy reception in my house, which happens, and so I needed to go outside, and it was a perfectly warm day. We could figure out about when it was, and walking around and around my cul-de-sac in a circle, Chef AJ and I had that thing, and I remember her startled voice as she was realizing that she didn't understand the math. Okay? That was all it took. That girl took a hold of that and started eating healthfully, and 27 months later, that lady was as thin as the Hollywood superstars of her era. Okay? That's what happened. A lifetime of struggling that was over, but along the way, what was happening was the self-confidence, the self-esteem. Everything was rolling in the right direction. This is how people make big changes, and this is how people do big things. All achievements, all big achievements are just a bunch of little achievements. There is no leap, okay? It's a process. It's a daily process of accretion. That's how it takes place. There are days, more spectacular days. There's days when you have some big insight when you're working on a problem. But Watson and Crick did not figure out the DA molecule, quote, one day. That was a process that went all along, and all kinds of things went into that, okay? There was a day when the insight came, but it could not have been possible without all of the other days before, okay? Now, so maybe, just occurs to me, sometimes you need outside help. And you do. Like AJ needed that. AJ was doing everything she could figure out how to do. There was critical information she didn't have. She happens to call me up. I happen to know the answer. She executes it. Done. Beautiful. Okay. Sometimes people need a time out where they change their environment completely so they can get to see what it feels like when they make these changes so that they can run a better cost-benefit analysis on it's worth it. That's what fasting escape is for. Okay. Maybe a lot of people can make use of that kind of experience for exactly that reason. But the notion is, why not you? Why not now? Why not running an experiment? This is how we will change possibly the CB that is sitting in an equilibrium and defending itself through energy conservation and possibly a distortion about what the real CB is on these outcomes. If you are a person in your 20s and you are 50 pounds overweight, and you are feeling a little lost and lonely and uncompetitive and don't know what to do, then thank you for asking this question, because this question rings around the globe. Okay, it's all over the place. It's in 100 million souls. And so the answer is the one that I've given you. We make some changes. We run some experiments. We challenge you to say, are you willing to do the work to earn some self-esteem? Don't think about the esteem now. Keep right focused on the feedback within. With the self-esteem will eventually come self-confidence. With the self-confidence of your improvements will eventually be noticed by the village, and you will get esteem. That's what we're after, and that's the integration of how the happiness process can be invested in, and then how you can get the victories that you need.